Hello, everybody. Welcome. You're here with me, Ella Barnard of the Creative Ladies Coalition, and we've got Christian Grattan.
He's definitely a creative lady.
Yeah. Yes. Well, an honorary creative lady.
Thank you.
Definitely somebody who helps creative ladies. So that's one of the reasons you were the first person I decided to have on here. Plus, I love you. Anyways, hearts. So Christian is a very successful 6-figure photographer who also has a brilliant business called the Click Cartel, where he helps other photographers to become awesomely successful photographers. So I thought he would be wonderful to have here on Creative Ladies because obviously photography is a kind of art. And it's one of the topics I want to talk about with you. So a lot of people, I think of as photography as just a way to record moments, which is not just, I mean, it's important. But I'm curious about how a photographer sees that versus just the regular person. Like, how do you see photography as art versus just a way, like just, like a tool?
Yeah. So, my career has spanned a long time. I started on film. And so with like digital, and then it switched over to like everyone has a camera on their phone. And then everyone's like, my camera is 5 megapixels. And so what I liken it to is just because I have a pair of scissors does not mean I'm going around giving professional haircuts. When it really comes down to those important milestones, and the important milestone can be getting a great like professional or personal headshot done of yourself. It's like, you might be able to trim your bangs every once in a while, but you need to go to the salon to get the right cut.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I like that.
The other thing is that a lot of times photographers complain because we're like, everybody has a camera now. But the other thing is that everyone also has a screen and a personal brand. So everyone needs to have great pictures of themselves. So in a lot of ways, the business to business side of things switched up, and the, shooting for a magazine, shooting for Condé Nast model of the 80s is very different today. But on the flip side, people have outlets for their personal pictures, their family pictures, and Tinder.
Yeah. Very important.
Very, very important.
Yes.
So how you present yourself is super important.
Okay. So
did that answer your question? Because I went on a tangent.
Yes. No, it's okay. It's okay. Because when I used to go to like the Metropolitan or in the Met in New York City, they have the rotating like photography section, I believe, where they have different photographers, because there's so much photography that they have to rotate it pretty regularly. And people, I don't think of photography as art until you go to a museum and you're like, oh, there's a show. Like you're a photographer, so you think of it more than just generally people think of it. So what do you think is the value or the benefit of having photography as art? Like what space does photography have or hold as art? And this might go with this next question, which is photography as a relationship. I wanted to ask you, because we talked about it one time. So maybe both of these together as photography, because you mentioned this relationship between the photographer, the person, the subject, and the person who then is viewing the photo later. There's this relationship, and that might have to tie in. I don't know.
Yeah, because you get into like photography as art becomes a really weird and tricky situation because it's also such a utilitarian thing. So it's like a photo of an object that's designed like solely to sell that object versus like art which captures a moment in time versus like you can go all the way to like abstraction but do it within photography. So there's an interesting spectrum as to where you might want to fit in terms of, you know, how much you want your work to be art. But then on the interesting part of it is that you can, let's say that you do, I teach people pretty much how to do business to consumer. So it's like, how do you, you know, sell photography to consumers and how do you create a large business off of that? One of the things that happens though with photographers is that after they learn all that kind of like systems and stuff and they do it for a little while, you now have to bring in more creative elements in terms of art and challenging yourself so that you don't burn out, because it still needs to be a creative endeavor. So you can start drawing on things that are more from the like full on total fine art side of things. And then there's also like, when does fine art go into documentary? You know, photography is interesting because there's making photos and taking photos. And those are kind of two separate things. You know, there's being in the right place at the right time with the camera, snap, look at, I got this great moment. There's also like embedding yourself in a place and waiting for the moment to happen, which is kind of in between. And then there's like going to the studio, creating lighting, hair, makeup, pew, 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 you know, all that, where you're like, I am making this photo happen. So, yeah, does that kind of explain? There's just a big continuum in terms of purely commercial all the way to, you know, straight up artistic. And in some ways the continuum goes around in a circle, because then you get like pop art, which comes back in where you're just like, you know, all of a sudden it's like, here's this purely, what looks like a purely commercial thing, but then the context, it's like, well, if you sell the same image in a gallery.
Right.
You know,
or the people who take like purely art and then sell them as art, not for like selling, you know, perfume or something. So, it's you're right. It's the circle. It's interesting. You
get to play a lot as the creator, and you also get to, when this speaks to your next question, which is you also get to work on the intention. So the interesting thing about photography is that your intention, it's a really interesting way to literally capture energy and figuratively capture energy. So you're capturing the energy between the photographer and the subject and the viewer. And so there's this magical thing that happens where it's like your intention and your energy. There are some photographers who can just get amazing things out of their subjects, and those aren't necessarily technically the best photographers. I know some photographers who don't know how to set their camera and have to have their assistants do it for them, or they have the same lighting setup and the same camera settings all the time. I mean, this is like 101 basic stuff. They basically can pretty much barely use their camera. And then they're like really big photographers because they are great at getting amazing stuff out of celebrities. And so because they have that energy, you know, the energy is huge. If you look at like somebody like Terry Richardson, his setup for what he uses for a camera is so basic and so consistent. It's like he just has an on-camera flash, uses his one bracket, boom, 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 knocks it out. It is like there's a look. He does the same thing every time. It's really about his relationship and what he can get out of the subject. And then that relationship as the viewer, like we're kind of coming in and getting this view into somebody else's world.
Yes. I was thinking about this.
We're getting about this relationship.
Yeah. Because I was thinking about this last night. I think photography is really unique because, and it's one of the things further down on the agenda, but photography, you get a chance to literally see someone else's perspective. Like you get to see the photographer's perspective. You actually get to, you know, you can't do that in regular life. You can't see through somebody else's eyes. But with photography, you get to see what that person sees, and there's something really special about that, I think. We have a question. Somebody's watching.
Yeah.
What is something from a mechanical standpoint that makes a photo emotional? So what makes a photo more than just the content of the photo?
So my immediate instinct is framing. That's something that actually is a subtle thing that changes how we experience a photo. So like there's the thirds rule, which is like if you break the frame, and for people who are on phones, I'm going to keep it more for the phone thing. You break the frame up into thirds. So there are 9 chunks of the frame. And it's like if you put a person over here, that's going to change, you know, how we experience it versus if you put a person over here. So if you leave like a lot of space behind the person, that's going to create this sense of tension, in part because you're directing the focus of where it goes. There's also so that's like a really, and like, look, I look taller because you've cropped off my head. But if I go down, I actually look shorter and shorter and shorter as a person. That's something that I'm always conscientious of when I'm cropping images, to make sure that the people look tall, because people want to look tall. Another thing, though, is that our eye sees the world at basically a specific kind of, there's a lens that mimics how our eye sees the world in terms of like the width. So we have like, we can see like a certain range from our eye. And we also can see a lot of things in focus front to back because we've got 2 eyes. Now, you can play with that by what lens you use. So you can open it up or you can close it down. And the thing about, let's say, using a telephoto lens is that when you close it down, the depth of field gets really shallow. So a lot of times for portraits, it will change the emotion of the picture if all you have are like the eyes in focus. And then by the time the ears come, it starts to soften. And then like by the time you get to the shoulders, it's really soft. And then everything behind you is just what's called bokeh, which is like, it's the Japanese term for how it blurs. And that also affects the emotional, let's say this, content of the image, because you're literally saying, this is what I want you to focus on. I want you to focus on the eyes and the face, and everything else goes away. So where the focus is will push what you're trying to get from the viewer. Like what you're trying to get as an emotion from the viewer.
Ooh. When you said that, you can, Emery, does that answer your question? You can let us know in the comments.
Yeah.
When you said that creates the tension by putting space behind it, I had never thought about we have regular ways of looking at things, and when you have this frame, this like context within what to take the picture, like you only see this much. So where you put things within it creates a tension or comfort. I had never thought about that.
Yeah. And like,
it was beautiful.
Yeah.
She says, that was great. Thank you. That was really beautiful.
Yeah. And so here's the thing is that like when you're learning, this is why I say like, it's the thing about a haircut. So it's like when you're learning to, let's say, take portraits of people, part of what your intention can be is to make that person look as good as possible while still looking like themselves. So like we could do like, because it's 2 dimensions, you could do all kinds of tricks, and like, you know, drag queens will like do all this contouring with makeup. So it changes their face because you're reading it in 2 dimensions. So like light and shadow is pretty much it. But what ends up happening is that over time, we as photographers have created a whole set of things that make people look their best, from lenses, poses, angles, lighting, makeup, hair. We have like tricks for all of this. So it's this thing of like, what haircut looks best with what face shape? How am I going to, you know, like push more jawline in the image? How am I going to do this? How am I going to do that? How am I going to direct a person so that I get a pose that doesn't look like it's too much? Because so that's the thing of being a professional, is honing those skills. So you're like, I want to be able to have people come to me and leave looking great. So what do I need to do that? And also, how do I go into a situation which is kind of and make it look fantastic? And so those are the tricks that you end up learning. And that's what makes, you know, your iPhone camera versus a Canon 5D Mark III completely different.
Yeah. Yeah. I love talking with you about this because I think a lot of people think because they have a camera on their phone that they are then photographers. And just talking with you, it's obvious that there's a whole lot in it that's more than just, you know, pointing and taking a picture with your phone. So I love that.
Yeah. But I do have to say that intention, that no tech, I'm just going to do it intention can still be amazingly compelling. Like there is a huge photographer, she was really big in the 90s, called Nan Golden, and her work is all just like on camera flash. Like it's just her documenting her life, but her life was like crazy and interesting, and she was around all these crazy people. And she also was like not even fearless, but kind of boundaryless in terms of what she would take pictures of. So like in terms of the technical, it isn't like the most like pictures, but it was like they were so real that intention, that realness came through, and it was just like, oh my God, this is compelling.
I have to sit with that for a second.
If you're super excited about, this is the takeaway, is that if you're super excited about taking a bunch of pictures from your phone and you're getting great at making compelling images. I mean, I took a picture of two people on their phone on the phone at the beach, and I was like, there's this like kind of like very light rock behind me, and there was all this light sand, and the sun was hitting it, and boom, 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 and they were like looking at me. It's just, I used it all, and I basically took their wedding announcement photo with their iPhone because I knew the tricks. I could look at my environment and say, I'm going to make this work. So, you know, if all you have right now is an iPhone, get into it. Get into the iPhone, get into playing with making black and white conversions, get into playing with the frames, because it's so easy and you get that instant feedback. You know, back in the day, we used to have to shoot film, and it was like doing your processing and stuff to get it done. And now it's like, practice.
Yeah.
So
it's leading me into my next question. I think one of the final questions. So in this group, the Creative Ladies Coalition, basically, I want to look at, I think we're at like in a shift. I think everybody can kind of feel like we're at this precipice of like, which way are we going to go? Like how in the world, and I want to be, and I want this Facebook group to be, and I want to put energy into shifting the world in the direction I want it to go. And I think art and just creativity and creation in general is a really powerful way of shifting. So I was curious, first question, do you have a story of a time when you have, through your photography or your photography business, either way, because I think the photography business is very powerful, but maybe through the photography, and then you could, and an example, we'll be able to see how dozens of people can change. Do you have an example? Taking a long time to say this question. Do you have an example of when your photography has had an impact on somebody in a positive way that you know, like, do you have a story of something like that?
Yeah, but I might cry.
Okay.
So I have a client who I adore, and she has two sons, and I shot both of her sons' bar mitzvahs. And like 4 or 5 weeks after the second son's bar mitzvah, her dad died suddenly. And so I was able to go through and pull all the images that I had taken of her with her dad, her sister with her dad, her sister's kids with their grandfather. Like I went through both jobs, through thousands of images, and pulled everything and basically printed them in duplicate and triplicate depending on who it was appropriate for. So it was like, what did the widow get? What did my client get? What did my client's sister get? And so, you know, a week after her dad passes, she gets an envelope and it's just full of pictures. And yeah, I'm telling you. So,
okay.
I mean, it's just one of those things where it's like, you know, my dad died suddenly, and had I gotten an envelope of, you know, just like great pictures of all these people who, you know, and him in it, I would have, that would have changed my world. So I was just like, okay, I can sit down and like just go through, pull these images and send them to her.
Oh my gosh.
And the thing is that like printed photos are so valuable. And in this day and age, a lot of what I teach my students is how to guide their clients into physical prints. Yeah. People want digitals all the time because they think that the digitals are going to be safety. And sure, but what ends up happening is that they check off, like, I got the digitals in their head, and they're like, job done, over. And the real safety is actually having physical prints. Mm-hmm. That's the thing that's going to last for 80 years. It's not going to be the digital. Nobody's going to go to a record in 20 years. You know, we're going to have something else.
No, everybody's going to be looking at albums. Like, everybody looks at albums. And that is, if you think of photography as the photographer, the subject, and the viewer happens, the viewing part happens with prints. Nobody, like, that's how you get to share the art, is with the prints.
Yeah, grandma ain't looking on her phone.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also,
yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. There are things that live in your house. Mm-hmm. The prints live in your house.
Like something on your wall.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Okay. So
you might have had a second question.
Yeah. The second question, I think it's just a point that I wanted to make is that if you're teaching people to be successful photographers, and you're doing it with this heart, right? Because clearly there's heart in this conversation that we're having, then you're exponentially creating those moments, like the one that you just told me about, where the mom or the woman with getting the pictures of her father and her grandfather for the kids, getting those photos, you're exponentially creating that. The more people that choose to become photographers get to choose to create that. You know, you get more and more people doing that.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I stress, or, you know, kind of bring to the forefront with my students, depending on where they are in their career, is to sit down and figure out who they're helping and what the value is that they bring to them immediately and in the future. And a lot of times I think people who are photography enthusiasts like to do kind of more like personal projects, things that are kind of more like stuff you'd see in a book or like in a gallery. Mm-hmm. And it's like, oh, I'm going to start exploring this thing because it's interesting to me. And I kind of say to them, in terms of a business perspective, and also in terms of you know, what are you doing? Who is your client? How do you serve? How do you help someone? And like, they'll come up with like really kind of out there answers. And at the end of the day, it's like, no, like, who signs their name to a check and hands you the check? And why are you helping that person? Mm-hmm. Why is what they're paying you small in comparison to the value that you deliver to them now and in the future? Mm-hmm. So does that answer your?
Yes. Yes. And
so it's very like the business part and the helping other people part don't need to be mutually exclusive. Yes. Like, part of the thing is that as you structure yourself and as you structure what you're doing, you actually can help more and more and more people with what you're doing.
Right. And tying it back to the beginning of the conversation where you're saying, and you get to add more creativity, because it helps to do art if you can be self-sustaining and bring income in, right? Like, that's obviously helpful. And you can start adding more creativity in and helping people and have a business. And anyways, it just seems like it's a win-win-win and. in a circle,
and you bring,
like you were saying.
And the thing is that you bring your energy into every shoot you do. So you bring your artistic background, you give your energy. It's like if you give 10 people a camera and the same subject, you're going to get 10 wildly different photos because it's 10 different people. So a big part of it is like your energy and your intention and your history, your lived experience all comes through in this moment. And it's really the amount of energy that is stored, how a photograph and image will store energy and intention is really unbelievable. Like that's hard to explain until somebody's done it. And then they're like, oh, like once you feel that photography is a way to store energy and intention.
Oh my gosh. I love it when you talk like this. and you can do that because you bring your energy to every photo, regardless of whether you're doing a headshot or whether you're doing, you know, some kind of esoteric other, I don't know, I'm not sure, shot.
And like the weird thing is that your relationship to the subject, your subject can be an inanimate object and you can fall in love with that subject because you're so engaged in that subject. Like photographers, food photographers, they see the food and they get like, ooh, this is fabulous. I'm going to make this spaghetti look so good.
Everybody loves to take pictures of their food. Like, oh my gosh, I have to remember this amazing looking food for forever.
Oh my God, I did take a picture of my coffee this morning.
There's something about it. You're like, this looks amazing. I want to be able to want to eat this for forever. Okay, so we've been talking for 30 minutes. Awesome. Such a great interview. If there's anybody out there who has questions, you're welcome to ask them now. We'll chit chat for a little bit, but I think we're probably good. Anybody? We'll give it a second. But yeah, I really want to thank you so much. Oh, and so while we're doing this, people, where can people find you?
theclickcartel.com. That's a great way to find me. But in all honesty, if you have any questions, just send me an email, Christian at theclickcartel.com. I love chatting with people. So just holler at me on email if you have any questions. The other thing too is I love to see people's work. So send me your work. Send me, if you have a website, that's fine. If you don't have a website, that's fine. You can literally just send me like 5-10 images, even if you're just messing around on your phone, you know, send me your work, Christian at theclickcartel.com, and let's chat about it.
Christian at I'm putting it there. I think I did something.
Yep, you did it.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much, Christian. And
for having me.
And I will see you later.
I'll see you later. Thank you so much. And guys, thank you for tuning in.
Yes. Thank you. Bye.